Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Place Inside. This is your host, Laurence Galian. We need subscribers. It doesn't cost you a thing, and it helps to get the word out there about the incredible potential of the human being. This is information crucial for humanity. Very few places will synthesize wisdom like we do here on The Place Inside, and offer you the sovereign dignity to make up your own minds without trying to force our agenda on you. So please check off that little like thing so YouTube knows you're out there. Click the subscriber tab and then click to be notified when new videos are released. We go deep down inside our subjects in a way that no one else does. We do our best to enlighten you while we entertain you and share with you wisdom from the most ancient of wisdom teachers to the very cutting edge of the world of people like Pim van Lommel, Rupert Sheldrake, and Michael Tazarian. Now, so I trust you've subscribed and liked this video. So let's begin. This is Laurence Galian, and this is The Place Inside. Buddha said, quote, "We are what we think. With our thoughts we make the world. Your worst enemy cannot harm you as much as your own thoughts," unquote. We fill our minds with knowledge about all sorts of things, but we run away from self-knowledge. Tom Rogers has much to share about scalar waves. I wish to share some of his thoughts with you. E equals mc squared is concerned with the collapse of matter turning into energy. Scalar waves, on the other hand, are connected with the collapse of time. Scalar waves are not electromagnetic waves like light, radio, microwaves, and so forth. Miracles are coming out of the scalar field because precisely it is beyond time. Its effect is in direct response to intention. The scalar field amplifies intention. Tesla worked with scalar waves, and it is reported that he proved their existence. The scalar field is being drawn from time. The scalar field is not linear. Some other terms for the scalar field are non-Hertzian waves, quantum fields, Tesla waves, longitudinal waves, tachyon waves, and neutrino fields. What are neutrinos? We've heard a lot about them. Well, we know they're subatomic particles. Neutrinos are faster than the speed of light. They can pass through the earth faster than you can pass a knife through whipped cream. When they slow down, they're called photons. When they slow down even more, they are called electrons. As energy gets, quote, stepped down, unquote, it can be utilized as useful in the form of what we call fields. For those who have ears to hear, there is no matter. All is space. There is no form. Form is perception only. This makes it pliable, plastic, capable of being affected by our intention, by our will. We are the power. The power is in us. The sun is a transformer. It is not a nuclear reaction like we've been taught in school and by the so-called experts. The sun is not burning anything. Only in the flares, the solar flares, is there fusion. But the experts don't know how the sun itself works. The sun transforms from some other dimension. It converts or takes energy from another dimension, counter space. The sun is definitely hollow. Where do I get this crazy information? A scientist by the name of Eric Dollard. Eric Dollard has done over 4 years of research on the sun at Sonoma State University before his lab was taken from him. Remember my second book, the title, The Sun at Midnight. The sun's origin is undefined because it comes from another dimension. Recall how Gurdjieff said that the sun is cold. People thought he was totally crazy when he said this. Well, the sun is not a nuclear bomb, the way the textbooks say. I'm sorry to disrupt your normal reality. We now return you to your paranormal reality. There is a template. We can call it formative causation that we have spoken about in several previous podcasts. This is how we impact what we call physical matter, or what we call our health. The potential of what we can bring into this world is virtually infinite. How many times and in how many ways have I said this to you? Do you want to believe you are small, weak, or only capable of small manifestations? You can demonstrate, you can bring forth magnificent manifestations. Can we identify with the source of creation? We are connected to things in nature, even to things that appear to be far away. Non-locality is coherent with ancient Vedic teachers. We are not separated from one another. This is the same as Patanjali's sutras and Jesus' teaching. The quote-unquote subject-object experience is breaking down in physics, and it is breaking down in our everyday world. We all experience events. The difference is that we have a choice as to how we are going to react. In other words, we get to choose. We can respond with resentment, fear, and anger, or we can interact with the person as an asshole and bring out the asshole in the other person. Do not fall into the lie of the quote-unquote New Agers, who would have you believe that if you say the word fuck or shit, then automatically you are not spiritual. I have personally heard one of the greatest true saints repeatedly pepper his daily talks with all sorts of expletives. His translator deleted them, but a friend who spoke the language translated his talks for me verbatim. When the mind chatter is quieted, miracles happen. For those who are not familiar with this language, permit me to digress a moment. All of us, whether or not we are aware of it, are constantly talking to ourselves. Most people have several voices talking sequentially or simultaneously in their brain. I'm not talking about schizophrenia, but this is just a normal experience that everyone has. Now, if you suddenly hear a voice that sounds like someone is in the room and talking to you, okay, then you have something to be concerned about. But this is a more subtle form of talking that goes on constantly in the brain. Gurdjieff, or as people mispronounce his name, Gurdjieff, taught that most people have about 50 eyes inside them. When I say I, I'm talking about the personal pronoun I. He said they have about 50 of these eyes inside them. If you quiet your mind a bit and just listen to what you are saying to yourself, you will probably be able to identify various voices. For example, you will hear your mother's voice, your father's voice, and any other number of assorted voices, your wife's voice, your husband's voice, and so on and so forth. Often, certain voices are associated with a particular kind of message. If your father was a judgmental religious person, you might often hear faintly in your head, if you have made a mistake, something like the following, quote, "You are no good. You're a stupid sinner. There's no hope for you. God doesn't love you. You're not lovable," unquote. And on in the same fashion. Does this sound remotely familiar? If you think this is absurd or ridiculous, I challenge you to listen carefully to what you are thinking, and then identify the type of voice that is doing the thinking, and then identify exactly whose voice is doing the thinking. You will discover enough detail to identify a whole village of people living in your head. Your first job is to create a sheriff, or a shaman, or master of the village. In short, you need to identify a dominant personality that is in charge. In Islam, this is called the vicegerent. In Islam, Allah created the human being as the vicegerent on the earth. This is a macrocosmically way of looking at the microcosmic fact that you need to elect or choose a boss who will take responsibility for what's going on with your thinking. A life of bliss causes a life of business to become less interesting. There are multitudinous ways to make money. As you spend time with your quiet mind, the collection of money may become less interesting. There have been a few occasions in my life when I quieted my mind completely. There are various ways, techniques to do this. One way is through the breath. There is a technique called Yoga Nidra. You can obtain MP3s and CDs that will talk you through Yoga Nidra and introduce some basic ideas. One technique of Yoga Nidra is called alternate nostril breathing. Without touching the nose with the fingers, inhale through your right nostril. Then exhale through your left nostril. Inhale again through your left nostril, and then exhale through the right nostril. Just practice this for a while until you get the technique down. I'll go over it again with you. Again, I repeat, without touching the nose with your fingers. Inhale through your right nostril. Then exhale through the left nostril. Inhale through the left nostril, and then exhale through the right nostril. Okay, so just keep practicing this for a while. You may need to repeat this a few times and listen again and again, but you'll get it fairly quickly. It only takes a few minutes, trust me, not more. Now, when you get good at alternate nostril breathing, you will then begin to count your breaths. So, when you inhale with your right nostril, you will say to yourself the number 1. Then exhale with your left nostril and count to yourself again the number 1. After that, inhale with the left nostril and count to yourself the number 2. And then exhale with the right nostril and count to yourself the number 2. You keep this up till you get to the number 5. When you reach the number 5, you inhale with both nostrils and exhale with both nostrils, and then resume alternate nostril breathing for number 6. So the same applies to all multiples of 5. For example, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, etc. When you get to all the multiples of 5, you inhale with both nostrils and exhale with both nostrils. And then when you get to the next number up, again you begin with the alternate nostril breathing. See how high you can get. See what number you can reach. If you make a mistake, you go back to the beginning. This is the way the technique is done. It is an ancient Tibetan meditation technique. Be patient. Enjoy yourself. Be aware of the breath. As you focus intently on the breath and the counting, you will begin to become aware about the brain chatter in your head. That's what they call it, like the chatter of monkeys, because it's going on incessantly. If you haven't done this before, you are not going to believe the racket, the literal noise that is going on in your head. But you can't really be worrying or thinking about anything while you are intensely focusing on counting and breathing, the Yoga Nidra. Another way of stopping thinking is by listening to classical music like Mozart. You must have heard of the Mozart effect. Focus completely on the sounds you are hearing, as if you were listening to a man or woman giving a speech. In other words, totally focus yourself on each sound without any judgment, without any thought about whether or not you like the music. Simply listen to the sounds without any thought. Listen to the sounds as if the symphony orchestra was some kind of alien speaking to you, and you are doing your best to understand what is being said to you. Many of the world's greatest composers, I am personally convinced, have at the very least done vast astral traveling. Their music is nothing less than cosmic. I believe that many of them have traveled in extraterrestrial craft, shall we say, extra-dimensional craft, throughout various universes and throughout the cosmos. That's true. Some good compositions to work with are the symphonies of the composer Sibelius. I'll spell his name in the description at the bottom of the video. But Sibelius, I swear, was out in outer space. And there's also another composer by the name of Janáček. He composed something called the Glagolitic Mass. He actually created his own harmony, his own harmonic technique for this composition. And the Glagolitic Mass, incidentally, Kenneth Anger used this as a score for one of his great Crowley movies. So check it out. Like I said, don't worry, I'll put the spelling of these composers and their pieces in the video description. Okay, finally getting to the point of all this. The times when I have completely quieted my brain through breathing, pranayama or yoga nidra, through Zen and complete absorption in music, they have dramatically changed my physical world. Absolute miracles have occurred. What was going to be an inevitable reality completely changed, and the opposite was manifested. One simple example was that when I was much younger, I was very much in love with a beautiful Swedish ballerina with blonde hair from Maine. Oh, she was gorgeous. When I looked up at her when we were making love, I just thought I was looking at the most beautiful woman in creation. Well, we were both attending a summer dance festival. As some of you know, I am a professional dance accompanist. I have played piano for some of the greatest ballerinas and dance companies in the world. I've actually played at the USA International Ballet Competition. Well, anyway, enough bragging. This woman had paid, or her parents had paid, for 1 4-week session at the Summer Dance Festival. At the time, remember, I was young. I was just beginning. In other words, I knew shit. My ballet accompanying skills sucked. It was my first job, so I had no special quote-unquote pull as a special accompanist at this time, like I do now. Well, this woman and I wanted to continue to stay together for the next 4 weeks of the Summer Dance Festival. She had no money. I had no money. Neither of us had any clout or connections. Nevertheless, this woman, the ballerina, went to speak one night to the head of the ballet festival to ask for a scholarship so that she could attend the second session for free. This would have meant not only free classes each day, free rehearsals and free performances, but also free food and free lodgings. I knew that the answer was going to be a loud and definite, "No, dear, I'm so sorry, we'd love to, but we're filled to capacity and we just can't possibly do that, but we love you and we wish you the best of luck in your career," blah, 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 blah. However, something inside me told me to shut up and just breathe. At the time, I only knew pranayama. I did not know yoga nidra. So I sat in my car and did pranayama for an hour. That means I did not think for 1 hour. After an hour, my girlfriend knocked on my car window. She was ecstatic. She told me that very mysteriously, the artistic director of the Summer Dance Festival gave her permission to attend the festival for free for the next 4 weeks. Our relationship deepened so much during that next 4 weeks that the ballerina and I moved to Massachusetts together and lived there together for an entire year in total bliss. I mean, it was the best. The mind is constantly churning out reality, not imaginary reality, but real, solid reality, or at least as solid as we think it is. On the occasions that you shut up the mind, then profound realities have a chance to manifest themselves. A wisdom much more profound than the simple logic of the conscious mind is manifested and brought forth in the world. Sleepwalking, you know, is a fascinating subject. Have you ever had a talk with a person who is sleeping? I had a lover for a few years who regularly spoke to me, quite intelligently, but it was a different personality. Sleepwalkers can walk over someone else who is sleeping. I have been known to do a thing, I don't know, maybe I should call it sleeping. Literally, I was attending a retreat one time when there was a hurricane, an enormous hurricane that was hitting the area. It was hitting the building. The doors were slamming open, the thunder and lightning was booming. Well, I went to sleep. People tell me that people were walking all over me, all sorts of noises and confusion, chaos was taking place, but I didn't know any of this was taking place. I was off somewhere else entirely. Well, sleepwalkers can walk over someone else who is sleeping. They do not know there are other people sleeping. The person who is asleep do not know they are asleep, and they don't know there are things like sleepwalkers. Just think about it. If they are hurt by the sleepwalker, say bruised from being stepped on, the sleeper will insist that they hurt themselves. They will never assume that there was a sleepwalker who walked over them and bruised them. Well, think about what I'm talking about here. Often we blame ourselves for our pain, and yet we don't even realize that someone else caused our pain. It is because we are symbolically sleepwalking. For instance, we can be in a relationship and feel very depressed. Our mate may have lengthy conversations with you asking, "Why are you so depressed?" They may even blame you for being depressed and tell you that they are thinking of leaving you because you are always so depressed. And you, because you are quote-unquote sleepwalking, don't realize that your mate is abusing you, and that is why you are depressed. Typically, a person who is drowning and is being saved by a rescue lifeguard will attack and beat up the lifeguard. In fact, and I learned this when I was a kid, I remember from my next door neighbor, the guy was a lifeguard. Lifeguards must learn how to break what are called wrestling holes that drowning people will place on the bodies of the lifeguard, dragging the lifeguards back down into the deep, because people being saved almost always fight back. They struggle to climb up the person that is trying to save them. If you are asleep and your house catches fire, the fire department is called. The smoke causes you to fall into an unconscious state. When the fireman arrives in his fire suit with his or her oxygen tanks and so forth, they will grab the person out of their bed and start taking them out the window and down the ladder. The person being saved who was sleeping frequently believes they are being kidnapped and fight back with all their strength. The poor firefighter is being pummeled for trying to save the life of a person who would have died from smoke inhalation if the firefighter had not dragged them out of their bed. So think about this. I'm talking on more than one level here. And also I want to give a shout out to all the firefighters out there and the volunteer firefighters. My brother Gerard has been a firefighter for many years, a captain of the firefighting department, and I think it is absolutely freaking amazing that at any hour of the night a man will get out of his bed or a woman will get out of her bed and come to your burning house and walk into your burning house and try to save your life. Just think about that. I just think it is one of the most brave, courageous, incredible things any human being can do. Now, again, let us consider relationships. For example, a woman may say and do the most horrible things to a man, yet she will be shocked and complain to her friends and say how her man reacted in such an angry way when he said or did such and such a thing. She will even feel 100% innocent. Why? Because she is asleep. She is doing all this abuse while she is completely asleep. People who have been very hurt in their past go into a kind of perpetual amnesia or a perpetual sleepwalking. The demand for drugs in the United States, facilitated by the illegal exporting of arms to Mexico, has created a bonanza for organized crime. Juarez is now the most deadly city in the world. Over 40,000 Mexicans have lost their lives in the drug war, with hundreds of thousands wounded. At present rates, the number will rise to 70,000 by the time President Calderon leaves office. Why is this? Because there is a huge demand for drugs in the United States. Why is there a huge demand for drugs in the United States? People glibly talk about, quote-unquote, recreational drugs. But really, what are recreational drugs? This is an important question. There is such a huge demand for drugs because people are living lives of pain, fear, and anger. And I'm talking about the average American. Fear their car will be repossessed. Anger at the government for taking so much money out of the paycheck. Pain from working at such a hard physical job all day. I know a guy who is literally working 3 jobs a day. He gets about 3 hours of sleep a night. I am not kidding you. He has kids and a wife to support. The man is a brilliant, naturally talented worker. At one of his jobs, a famous hotel, he's the handyman. At the other, he's the painter. And at the third, a nursing home, he fixes whatever needs to be fixed, from plumbing to literally constructing carpentry, a new room. When you go to bed exhausted and worried about the repo man taking back your car and waking up in the middle of the night to go to work and worrying about wherever you're going to get the money to pay your taxes, people start to freak out. They need something to anesthetize themselves. A huge number of people cannot afford to go see a psychiatrist. And anyway, the drugs psychiatrists prescribe have such horrible side effects. Most people can't stay on them. Also, these psychiatric drugs often cost a fortune. Another large group of people simply do not believe in psychiatrists or psychologists or talk therapy, or else they simply do not have an extra hour in their day to drive to the therapist's office to talk about their problems. So what do people do? They self-medicate. In other words, they take something to make themselves feel a little good in the midst of all their suffering. Unfortunately, there are few people who come around who teach ways to get out of suffering without asking for a huge amount of money in return. I mean, just look at all the internet advertisements and even YouTube videos, which are often just a tricky way to get you to go to a website where they try to sell you some miracle cure, usually for $79. I don't know what it is about this $79 thing, but everybody's willing to sell you some kind of miracle cure or something for $79. And most diabolical of all is that many people are trying to do all of the above work I mentioned, all the painful, restless nights spent worrying about how their pension is disappearing in bank fraud and stock market collapse. And yet, they still feel they must be patriotic. This creates a huge amount of cognitive dissonance in people. They look around them and see an America crumbling and giving up all its hard fought for values, and yet they still must talk themselves into believing that their lives are like some TV sitcom. America is the greatest nation on earth, they proclaim to their fellow workers at their job, while they are secretly checking their bank accounts at their computers to see if they can pay their bills this month. Then I can't avoid mentioning this group. They're what I call the angry bunch. We all know these people. Some of us are these people. I fall into this classification from time to time. I'm talking about the folks who are awake enough to know that they've been ripped off, tricked, and sold a bill of goods. They know the government is lying about contact with trans-dimensional beings, about free energy, about underground bases, about Planet X, chemtrails, GMO foods, and so on. These people are pissed, and rightly they should be. Somehow their anger gives them the energy to get through their day and makes them feel like even though the system is screwing them, at least they're smart enough to know they're being screwed. Still, biologists are revealing that we are just dramatically shortening our lives, living our lives in a state of perpetual anger. So what's the solution here? When we're angry, we usually act out in stupid ways. Am I not right? By getting into flame wars or actual fist fights with people, or partying excessively, engaging in unprotected and meaningless sex, going to the extent of buying weapons, building bunkers, joining certain white racist and black racist groups, and the list goes on and on. We who are here inside the place inside are well aware that something is very much the wrong with the world, and we know pretty much exactly who's pulling the puppet strings. But we do not respond with anger. We do not respond with violence. We respond by changing the energetic system. We respond by becoming knights, genuine knights, authentic knights, knights of integrity. We don't need to steal someone's parking space to feel a little power, okay? We don't need to behave in ways to feel that we have a little strength. We don't freak out if some old lady, for example, is walking a little slowly in front of us. Instead, we say hello to her and maybe help her carry her packages and help her cross the street. You know, it doesn't stop there, not by a long shot, but I just want to give you some kind of overview, if you want to call it that, of the psychic landscape out there. Have you ever walked in your sleep? Ever seen someone walking in their sleep? It's a weird experience, let me tell you. Sleepwalkers react very little to you. Often they do not make eye contact. Have you had interaction with people who you can talk to for hours, and yet they have little or nothing to say? I once dated a woman who smoked approximately 100 cigarettes as we sat in my car talking. Well, I tried to have a conversation, but she just smoked and didn't say anything. Well, I think she was sleepwalking. Or have you been with a person who just, quote unquote, observes you, like you're some kind of library specimen, a lab rat, or a medical patient? You are being studied. Make no mistake about it. Maybe the other person is studying you to determine your income, your intelligence level, your social skills, and so on. I just realized I said library specimen. I meant laboratory specimen. Thank you. Anyway, this kind of observation is just another kind of cop-out. Rather than having to engage you in conversation, the observer gets to sit and remotely look at you without feeling. I mean, you feel like you're sitting in front of a robot, or maybe in front of a psychologist, or someone from the government interviewing you. Finally, there are the people who, when you make love with them, they just lay there like a corpse. Have you ever experienced this? If they are female, often they will just lay there like a dead person. Or if they are male, they might ejaculate prematurely. These people do not want to engage their partner in an intimate way. They do not want to make contact. In other words, they want things to be over as soon as possible. And if they can't make it over as soon as possible, they will self-medicate, like the woman I spoke about who smoked 100 cigarettes in the car, or a person who be drinking who knows how many beers. Let's talk about trees. Trees are an access to the records of wisdom. Wood holds, it contains wisdom. Library books made from pages of wood are only a hint of what once existed in the primeval forest. Do you know that at one time, almost all of Europe was covered in one gigantic forest? Osho was a great master. Very often, very great men and very great women give rise to very great enemies. The yin-yang concept. The dark forces, the dark masters, want to destroy the workers of the photonic transportational light. Thus, if we look at the biography of every great man and woman, we are going to find some really terrible things written about these great teachers, because disinformation is introduced into these people's lives, and agents are dispatched to deliberately induce and cause certain circumstances to happen to attempt to make the particular teacher or person look bad in the eyes of the public. Now, I'm not just talking about the present or 50 years ago or 100 or 200 years ago. I'm also talking about 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. False information can be given to someone, for example. Or the old standby. They can send in some sexy person to seduce the teacher. Other examples are so-called students who are sent in to deliberately start arguments, dispense rumors and lies, and generally destroy the reputation of the man or woman. Now, you know I firmly believe in keeping my eyes and ears open. Never turn off your bullshit meter, because there are many false teachers, charlatans, and grifters out there. However, it struck me only recently how it is just impossible that every great person could have committed such terrible crimes. Well, the plain fact is that they did not. For example, people will say negative things, very negative things, about the great Martin Luther King. Do you know his family won a multi-million-dollar lawsuit against the United States government for causing his death? Of course you haven't heard about this, because the press is controlled by the global elite. Dr. Pinkola Estes, one of the wisest people I know, a woman who is the greatest storyteller I know, says this, quote, though the word wild has been used as a pejorative, in its natal form, it means to be of a beautiful integrity and cohesiveness, spiritually, emotionally, physically, heart-wise, soul-wise, unquote. Isn't that beautiful? This sounds like a great goal to have for your life. Men, let's strive to be wild men. Women, consider as your goal to be wild women. I want to mention here, there's this new internet TV station, Gaiam TV. I had Netflix for years. Netflix, in my opinion, doesn't hold a candle to Gaiam TV. Again, you know, I don't receive a penny for recommending any of this to you. But for my money that I send in each month to get my movies and documentaries, I have gotten superior content by far on Gaiam TV than Netflix. Gaiam TV has over 5,000 streaming videos that you are not going to find on YouTube. Also, besides them having several excellent regular Gaiam hosts, there are David Wilcock and George Norrie. They have shows every Monday and Friday night. And you know, I've changed my opinion about Wilcock. For the longest time, I thought, well, honestly, that he was a dork, just kind of riding on the coattails of the fact that he looks like Edgar Cayce. But as I've been listening to him and watching him on Gaiam TV, I am now convinced that this man has integrity. For example, he cleaned himself up at an early age, another thing which I admire. He stopped drinking and drugging. He recently stated flat out, quote, "Elected government is not running the show," unquote. And he went on to talk about the beginnings of a ruling group that started during the time of the Roman Empire, which seeks for a new world order. And you and I know that couldn't be more true. He also talks about something that Greg Braden goes into in depth, namely this, that the burning of the Library of Alexandria was a false flag operation. All the major important texts were taken out, and many of them found their way to the Vatican Library, according to Wilcock. On the other hand, Braden traveled to Tibet, climbed a huge mountain, and saw and photographed copies of the books from Alexandria that were handwritten into the Tibetan language. And I saw personally his photographs. So that's quite impressive. But it is very interesting. I think we can go back to this concept that the burning of the Library of Alexandria was a false flag operation. Now, in Braden's case, unfortunately, because he released this knowledge, the Red Chinese government came in and seized all the books. However, do not despair. The Tibetan monks are no fools, and everything was recopied, and the new copies were hidden in another location before the arrival of the Chinese. So therefore, while the Red Chinese have the information in the books, it has not been lost to humanity, and certain Tibetan lamas know this information also, and they know how to make use of this information. For we both know that it's one thing to have diagrams and words on a page, and it's another thing to know what to do with that information and those diagrams. Think about the Voynich manuscript, for example. Does all this sound vaguely familiar, like perhaps the beginning of another Mahabharata? Or perhaps a psychic, paranormal Cold War? I don't believe everything David Wilcock says, or Michael Tazarian, or Graham Hancock, Whitley Strieber, Stephen Quayle, or even Bob Dean says. Even though I think Michael Tazarian, Whitley Strieber, Bob Dean, and Graham Hancock are nothing less than remarkable. I highly recommend that you don't believe everything a person says. We are all parts of the puzzle. Remember the snowflakes. No two snowflakes are the same. And when you think back to the past, the number of snowflakes that have fallen since the dawn of time must be literally astronomical. Tell me this: why would an ultimate reality want a reality where there is extreme diversity? Because it wants the puzzle to be solved. It wants the pieces to come together. It wants you and I to talk and to meet and to go out stargazing. It wants you to be in the laboratory in which all this information is synthesized. That laboratory is in your being. The chemical reaction will take place inside of you. I'll let you in on another little secret. It doesn't take a nuclear scientist to figure this one out. If there's never been two snowflakes the same, no two fingerprints the same, and so forth, then the diversity is going to extend up and it's going to extend down. It's going to extend to the right and it's going to the left. It's going to extend from the big to the small and from the small to the big. Therefore, we are never going to find the smallest particle or the biggest picture of all the membranes of all the universes flapping together in the cosmic breeze. Infinity extends infinitely in every direction, infinitely. Let me tell you something now that you should not forget. When the internet was just starting out, a professor of computer science at Hofstra University, who was a good friend of mine, came up to me one day and quietly said, quote, "Laurence, be very careful what you write on the internet. It is there permanently and can come back to haunt you," unquote. At the time I was young, the internet was new, and I didn't give his words the respect I should have. What happened? I got into a lot of flame wars. After a while, I just walked around in a perpetual state of anger. Anger at what someone had just written, or angry about what I was going to write back. Finally, I had to sit myself down and have a long talk with myself. I resolved to stop this constant bickering. I realized that I was just angry inside and was looking to pick a fight. I was no better than a guy who gets drunk every night in a bar and just looks around for someone to punch. So I stopped posting for a few years. I still wrote on the word processor and read online every day, but I didn't post. Well, even though I stopped posting, my computer science professor friend was right. At one point, before I had stopped posting, I thought I might have had a certain medical condition, which we will not describe here. But anyway, there was not the levels of privacy then that there exist now. Not that there really will be any privacy in the future. Anyway, I had a big karmic teaching. I had misled a woman I was seeing. In other words, I was not clear with her that I did not feel like we had a chance for a long-term commitment. And I also did a few other things I'm not proud of. Little did I know that over a period of several months, she hunted down all my posts about my medical condition and reposted them all over the internet. It took me literally months and hundreds of hours to have all these posts removed. So I learned quite a lesson from this. One lesson was that I thought I knew a lot about the internet in those days, but this woman knew a lot more than I did. she was a lot more computer savvy than me. It's a good rule of thumb to always assume that no matter how smart or talented you are, there's always someone smarter and more talented. Check your ego at the door, as they say. Now, here's my warning to you. You all know about speech recognition software, and not just speech recognition, but now documentaries are being made with artificial voices. One thing David Wilcock does is he always gives credit where credit is due. If he finds a piece of information out from someone, he tells you who that person is. In fact, he actually tries to help some people get better known, who have had their material stolen and who have been neglected by the quote-unquote experts. So, my prediction is that everything you write will be compared to everything that has ever been written. If you are stealing someone's work, in the future, the quantum computers will know in less than a heartbeat who you stole that information from. And if you are a public speaker, for example, like a radio show host, all your words will become a permanent record lasting forever and will also be analyzed as to the ideological source of your thinking, similarity of words and phrases to other authors, thinkers, and public speakers, and for shame, it will also be revealed if you are quoting someone else without giving them credit and pretending you are speaking the words for the first time yourself. Thus, think twice before you write or say anything, because it is going to be carved in stone. The mysterium tremendum is described in the Doors of Perception by Aldous Huxley in the following terms, quote, "The literature of religious experience abounds in references to the pains and terrors overwhelming those who have come too suddenly face to face with some manifestation of the mysterium tremendum. In theological language, this fear is due to the incompatibility between man's egotism and the divine purity, between man's self-aggravated separateness and the infinity of God," unquote. Lecturer and author Dr. Nick Begich and Steve Quayle discusses Project HARP, scalar waves, and its capability of affecting the climate or causing earthquakes, as well as updates on mind control and brain altering and brain enhancing technologies. Quote, "Mind effects are one of the most fertile grounds for military planners. It is one of the biggest areas of research in terms of trying to figure out, manipulate, mold, shape, and form the mind," unquote, Dr. Begich noted. While DARPA serves as the lead, almost every branch of the U.S. military explores this kind of technology, he continued. Quote, "Electronic telepathy is just a synthetic version of what is the natural radio of human beings. If you will, each of us is a transceiver and a transducer. We're picking up energy, we're transferring energy, unquote. And that's why telepathy, energy medicine, and higher human capacities are all associated with changes in energy states. But a mental background of fear and anxiety will prevent people from experiencing higher states of consciousness. So think about this. The more we can be made to be fearful and anxious, the less we can experience higher states of consciousness. Quayle, who I personally believe is quite connected with the Christian agenda, but he does have some good information, informs us that the machinery to affect weather has gotten smaller and cheaper over the years, and that there are currently 72 ionospheric heaters. In addition, climate controlling technology like Project HARP. In other words, Project HARP is just one form of climate controlling technology. There are many other forms of ways to control the environment. Steve Quayle also discusses the world's escalating flashpoints in his new work on giants. Quayle states that some giants have been captured and are being kept underground under incredibly strong prison cells. Regarding the multiple areas of growing tension in today's society, Quayle said, quote, "I think a lot of the people who have been living in denial now have to admit that things are really getting absurd and dangerous in the world," unquote. He traced the source of much of the world's present woes to the international banking elite, saying, if money is the root of all evil, then the control of that money is the control of that evil. He asserted that the ultimate agenda behind the financial crisis is to, quote, bring America down to third world status. He talked about future events which may take place in line with this plan, such as a massive ammo tax to curb gun possession, escalating American tensions with Russia over oil, and the use of chemtrails to sicken the population. But back to the giants. Quayle alleges that shadowy elements of the government are also keeping giants in suspended animation at secret labs in order to study their genetics. According to his sources, the body temperature of the giants runs around 120 to 130 degrees, and that these guys can go 40 miles per hour in 2 steps. Quayle, in this interview that I was listening to, was later joined by an anonymous pilot who claimed to have transported a dead giant shot by the military while stationed in Afghanistan. This pilot estimated that the creature was, quote, 12 feet tall, give or take, and around 1,100 pounds, unquote. The pilot also noted that the being had 6 fingers on each hand, and its feet were adorned with rudimentary shoes made of canvas. According to what his superiors told him, the giant body was eventually, quote, transloaded back to a base in Ohio, unquote. So that brings up some very interesting facts. Now, did you know that 750,000 households in America have gone off the grid? Documentarian and journalist Nick Rosen discussed living off the grid, typically in alternative communities. This means living independently of the utility companies and providing your own power. Quote, but it does not mean living in the Stone Age, unquote. He went on to say, it's about being more self-reliant, being less dependent on the system, and realizing we have to look after ourselves. Rosen bought a hut and some land in Spain along the Mediterranean and was able to go off the grid using such things as solar panels and rainwater harvesting. His website offers an interactive section called Land Buddy for people to help each other go off-grid in their local regions. A good friend of mine said to me recently that he recommends to friends of his who are receiving some form of government assistance, he said to them, just start pretending that you are not receiving this government assistance and start thinking, how would you go about making up for that lost money? You gotta get the brain cells working in this regard. Once you get yourself thinking in this direction, you'll be amazed that your mind, your unconscious, will get the message that you want some information, and it will find, discover, and literally download information for you. Now, this is where something called the shamanic guides come in very handy. Many shamans have met guides during their journeys. The New Agers call them spirit guides, and I have no problem with that because also some shamans call them spirit guides. During my very first shamanic journey, I met 5 of my guides. Now, I want to tell you this right off the bat. A lot of people, a lot of experts on YouTube, elsewhere, when they start talking about their guides, they'll tell you their names right off the bat. They'll say, my spirit guide Bob, blah, blah, blah. A true shaman never reveals the name of his or her spirit guide. I don't care who you're talking to, your best friend, your wife, your husband, your child. If you're in the confessional in the Catholic Church, You do not reveal the name of your spirit guide. Okay? Now, there is also something called agreements or contracts that you make in the spirit realms. And some of these contracts, most of these contracts, you are unaware of. You may make certain contracts to have certain types of relationships for a certain amount of time, earn a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time, and so forth. Now, one of the advantages of the spirit guide is that your spirit guide can renegotiate this contract. So we will be talking more about that in the future. This is a very, very powerful subject to go into. And remember, we've talked about this also. You do not need to do ayahuasca to meet your shamanic guides. Drumming, shamanic drumming, can take you immediately into the spirit worlds. There's a lot of methods, certain forms of breathing, of breath control, can take you immediately into the spirit realms. I am definitely not saying that the sacred plant substances are bad. I honor and respect our sacred spirit plant brothers and sisters. However, the big however is that you need to have a real shaman help you when you travel. And right now, it's big business in the Amazon to hang a shingle up that says shaman and charge some sucker $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 to go on an ayahuasca journey where you shit all over the place and throw your guts up. Well, that's all well and good if you have a real shaman with you, but not when you have a rip-off artist. So back to the grid. 750,000 households in the United States have gone off the grid, and this trend is growing at a rate of 10 to 15% a year. In various parts of the country, people and communities are successfully becoming independent. Powerful groups like the Bilderbergers and the Trilateral Commission have sought to keep the old, inefficient energy systems in place in order to protect their investments. But the off-the-grid movement serves as an alternative to this kind of centralized power and control. I recently had the pleasure of meeting a great teacher by the name of Sri Shuddhananda Brahmachari, who teaches us about the importance of breath as it applies to individual activation of personal potential, and as it applies to actual damage that can be caused to the human race. He writes the following quote: "A child breathes with the abdomen, and that is nature breathing its pristine rhythm through the child. The child is amazingly energetic and smiles the joy of natural life, unquote. As we grow in age, we lose nature's rhythm and our breath becomes shallow. Our unconscious life leads to lessening capacity to breathe, and it lessens the ability of the blood to have enough oxygen to supply basic nutrients to the cells and to your molecules. The great sages of India, like the great sage Patanjali, in their intuitive wisdom, realized that the human race could bring destruction to the planet itself if we are not trained to extend or expand our breathing capacity. Shallow breath leads to stress, constriction of the flow of life, mind-body imbalance, and emotional crises at an individual level and, frighteningly, at the collective level of consciousness. All this is caused by shallow breath. And I know that many people would agree with this. Pranayama is the science and the art of extending our power to inhale, exhale, and retain or hold our prana. The prana is the subtle, vital life force whose gross manifestation is breath. So let me unpack that for you. Pranayama is the name of the science, okay, the esoteric, paranormal, occult science. It's the name of the science of extending our power to inhale, exhale, hold our vital life force. Now, the gross manifestation or the outer manifestation of the life force is what we call breath. But really hidden inside the breath is what is called prana, which is the subtle, vital life force. When you practice pranayama, you become conscious of your breath. With expansion of breath comes huge stamina, endurance, clarity of mind, and right judgments. We all suffer in life when we lack stamina. When our string of endurance tears off, when mind is cluttered and cloudy, when you make wrong decisions or judgments. Pranayama assures you of this profound need of your healthy and harmonious life, individually and collectively, with your fellow human beings that you're living with. And thus teaches Sri Sri Shuddhananda Brahmachari, who, by the way, prefers simply to be called Baba. Aleister Crowley spent a long time in Malaysia perfecting the art of pranayama. One can free oneself of all sorts of psychological problems and complexes through pranayama. And of course, pranayama can restore health to those suffering from a wide variety of physical illnesses. Sri Shuddhananda Brahmachari also adds this fascinating little addition to his small paper on pranayama. I want to quote, "Many people are blessed with power to heal. Even you have power to heal. Your hands are made not only of bones and flesh and blood, they are intensely vibrating energy. Whenever you close your eyes and open your inner eyes of awareness to the higher intelligence and healing energy, you vibrate with that energy. If, with utmost humility, you surrender yourself to that light, you will continue to vibrate with that energy." And he goes on to say that at some point you will become a channel of that divine healing energy. You can thus heal yourself. You can heal yourself of the most incurable diseases. For the universal intelligence, the word impossible does not exist. And this is what Baba is teaching us now. Graham Hancock, as you know, discusses lost civilizations and the importance of exploring our own consciousness. Hancock's premise is that technologically advanced societies existed on Earth as far back as 12,000 plus years ago, the end of the last ice age. He says these civilizations were lost when a gigantic comet collided with the planet, causing the ice sheets to melt and raising sea levels by more than 400 feet. As evidence, Hancock points out that large stone monuments, some as big as Stonehenge, can be found 120 feet below the surface of the ocean off the coast of Japan. And I'm sure all of you know that Hancock himself is out there diving in the water, exploring these incredible monuments, these incredible archaeological finds. Now, people ask me about why I say that sports are a form of mind control. They say, aren't sports fun? Aren't they healthy? Yeah, sure. If you play sports, if you exercise, it is a wonderful thing to move the body. The body loves to move. It's a necessity for the body. The body demands of you to move it. In fact, a great thing to do is every morning, first thing in the morning, is to put on some music, your favorite dancing music, and for 5 minutes dance. Just dance. Jump out of bed, put on that music, and dance for 5 minutes every morning. But are you playing the sport, or is the sport playing you? How much are you involving yourself in the sport? That's why I talk about it. We have all seen videos, and some of us have been physically present when athletes will attack each other physically on the field, the hockey rink, and so on. We've seen coaches actually attack, trip up, and kick little kids because they don't want the opposing team to make a goal. Is this normal behavior, I ask you? But this is not even my main point. My main point is this. Do you live vicariously in the lives of famous athletes? Do you sit on your couch or in your chair and in your imagination feel and thrill to the goals, to the touchdowns, to the golf putts, the baskets, the field goals of your favorite athletes? Well, this is not living your life. This is living someone else's life and pretending it is your own. You are getting a pretend sense of life out of seeing other people living their own lives. Matrix, anyone? And worse still, are you earning the money they are earning? You are jumping up and down in your seat when someone scores a goal, but are they sharing part of their millions of dollars with you? I don't think so. Bert Hellinger had a great insight when he created family constellations. For as the film Cloud Atlas mentions, quote, "Our lives are not our own. We are bound to others, past and present, and by each crime and every kindness, we birth our future," unquote. What our ancestors have done, good and bad, what we have done in past lives, good and bad, and in between, what our relatives do now, good and bad, what we do now, good and bad, all are intertwined, and they all give birth to our destiny. This is a much more sophisticated approach to karma than has been presented before in popular books. It is also a more sophisticated approach to the law of the threefold return. We owe a great deal of thanks to the groundbreaking work of Dr. Rupert Sheldrake in developing the theory of morphogenesis, in helping to understand how human lives are intertwined and developed. You are not who you were yesterday. You are not what you will be tomorrow. You are who you are today. Therefore, you should use tools that will help you today. Every day, you are in the laboratory of your life. Explore your loves. Love what you love. Involve yourself with what you love. Why spend time watching some stupid sitcom if what you really love are graphic novels? Why spend time at some bar if what you really love is, say, a delicious latte or a special salad at your favorite restaurant? Why spend time talking with someone that just bores you and dumps their problems on you when you really love a certain type of music that you can play on your iPod this very second? The great Giordano Bruno had a great system to help recall the massive amounts of information that he stored in his brain. We spoke about this in a previous podcast, but I want to give you something new and some cutting-edge information on the subject of memory. What is your dominant sense? This is urgent for you to know. It will help you to recall what you have studied. Is it the sense of smell? Do you remember the smell of a particular barbecue or the scent of a perfume of a man's or a woman's hair? Is it sight? Are you a museum person who loves to look at artwork? Or do you love to look at particular machines or motors? Is it hearing? Cross-connect a song with an event in your life. Do you remember the music that was playing the first time you made love? Are you a gourmet and love the sense of taste? If so, you must taste something every day to make an imprint on your memory. Or are you a big hugger? You love to hug people, and so the sense of touch is so important to you. Okay, my point is this. All these senses will help to imprint facts on your memory. Combine any of these with what you wish to study, and this will help trigger the memory for the speech, the concert, the interview, or whatever you need to remember. Okay, but you must know what your dominant sense is. And then you combine your dominant sense with what you're studying. If you are a composer, maybe you need a particular type of wine to drink as you are composing. My favorite composer, Richard Wagner, had some fascinating habits to help with his composing. He adored silk. He had a silk suit made for himself, complete with silk underwear and silk curtains on his windows. Only when all this was in place did he begin composing his masterpieces. Now, this may sound crazy, but science is confirming this as fact. And this will also help you to make decisions, because you can realize what really motivates you. What is the energy track that your being truly operates on? And then tap into that. If your body really operates on physical sensation, like moving, like dancing, like running, okay, tap into that. If it's in vision, okay, then surround your space, your home, with all sorts of things that are visually stimulating to you. And do this with all your senses. Find out what is your dominant sense. It can help you memorize, it can help motivate you. It can help you make decisions. What distinguishes you? At night, all the great initiates, all the great Sufi teachers, I could go on, all the great Rosicrucian masters recommend one thing: go through the day in reverse. It's called the reverse review. It only takes a couple of minutes. Remember your day, but remember it in reverse. This is so important. You must connect to your timeline so that you can then begin playing with and experimenting with the timeline. So you think about, what's the last thing you did before getting into bed? Was it brushing your teeth or putting on your pajamas? And then what did you do before that? Was it turning off your computer or turning off lights in the house? Just go back through the day in reverse. Live your life with zeal. Live your life with enthusiasm. I really get annoyed, big time, when people differentiate between spiritual beings and extraterrestrial beings. I heard a woman on a recent documentary detail several types of extraterrestrials she saw: Syrians, Nordics, winged Draco reptilians, blue Arcturians. And then she said that she saw several beings that looked like Egyptian deities, and she added that they might be some kind of spiritual manifestation. We are all made up of the same cosmic stuff. We are all made up of energy vibrating at various frequencies. Or we could say photons vibrating at various frequencies, or neutrinos. However, to differentiate beings into two categories, physical and spiritual, in my opinion, is a stupid mistake. We have plants, animals, minerals, and humans on this earth. Certainly we are all very different, yet at the same time, we are all energy manifestations. For me, this is crucial because we do not want to put so-called, quote, spiritual beings, unquote, on a pedestal, regarding them as superior to us. Certainly there are very advanced beings which deserve our respect, yet we all exist in a continuum of energy, a rainbow of energy that shines throughout the cosmos. I want to go back to Jung's book on UFOs. Michael Tazarian highly recommends Jung, and I agree with Michael Tazarian on this point. Jung writes, quote, "The relatively unconscious man, driven by his natural impulses, imprisoned in his familiar world, he clings to the commonplace, the obvious, the probable, the collectively valid, using for his motto, 'Thinking is difficult, therefore let the herd pronounce judgment,' unquote. It is an enormous relief to him when something that looks complicated, unusual, puzzling, and problematical can be reduced to something ordinary and banal, especially when the solution strikes him as surprisingly simple and somewhat droll. Hence, the snickers of television news reporters when they speak to a so-called expert who explains that what someone saw was a temperature inversion or swamp gas. I grew up on Long Island, and we didn't have many swamps on Long Island. We did have things called sumps, but that's another story. Any of you people from Long Island, you know what a sump is. But Jung is spot on. People prefer to cling to the commonplace, the obvious, the probable, and the collectively valid. People prefer for the group to make decisions for them. So if the media and the government experts have made the decisions, then people generally prefer for the experts and the government to explain reality to them. I did have several experiences with the Arcturian blues. And I'm unfortunately not talking about music here. A beautiful female came to me on several occasions. Obviously, a very advanced soul, very mature and wise. Are you going to be an authentic, congruent, actualized human being? Or are you going to be little more than an animal that works in a boring job, has an unhappy marriage, hates his neighbors, and feeds himself like a hog whenever the opportunity arises? You can set a goal of weeding out your own garden by getting comfortable with yourself before you can begin entering into various types of relationships with other human beings. What am I talking about here? Well, do your actions align with your authentic self? Is there consistency between your thought and action? Walk your talk. Be real. So much have to get through our learned identity in order to get to the real self, the real information. That is where the love is. That is where the expansion is. Whatever is learned is not innate. In other words, if it can be learned, it can be unlearned. Have you ever met a master who could just talk about any subject for any length of time? Osho was one such master. This information that I am giving to you is absolutely useless unless you put it into practice. Otherwise, you are just loading your donkey with a lot of books, and eventually your donkey is going to collapse from all that weight. When you want to bring your energy into your body, do this. Imagine a ghost of yourself, a see-through you, standing upon your head. Okay? Let me start again, because I could have taken you by surprise a little bit with that. When you want to bring energy into your body, when you want to energize yourself, imagine a ghost of yourself, a see-through you that is standing upon your head. Okay? Then using your real physical hands, grab up onto your ghost self ankles and pull him or her down until he or she matches exactly with your arms, your head, your torso, your pelvis, your legs, and all the way down to your feet. When you are fully within your own power, you can accomplish great things. So, you can do this exercise before you give a public speech, before you ask a man or woman out on a date, before you go into your boss's office to ask for a raise, before you begin your yoga practices for the day, and so on. We've talked a great deal about psychic protection, and I think I get more emails and letters about psychic protection than about any other subject. If you want advanced techniques, you've got to go back to the previous podcast, as I give very advanced techniques. However, I want to add something else today. Something that I haven't mentioned yet. Smudging. Smudging with sage. That sounds like the name of a TV show or something. Do you know what smudging is? It is an ancient Native American indigenous tradition. It's an Indian tradition. Sage is a dried herb. The Native Americans bundled together a thick group of these dried herbs, bound together with a light rope or cloth. You light the sage just like you would light a stick of incense. It requires a little more work than a simple stick of incense. After you have lit it on fire, just like with an incense stick, you blow out the flame gently, and it continues to smoke. Again, just like an incense stick. But of course, this is much larger than incense. It has a very intense smell, somewhat reminiscent of marijuana. Some people mistake it for marijuana who do not have much experience around marijuana. Often, Native Americans will place the smudge stick onto a large, open seashell. Remember now, it is hot, very hot. I mean, maybe some of you have accidentally burnt yourself with an incense stick. Well, you can imagine how hot a smudge stick can get. So you can burn your hands if you are not careful. So many Native Americans will get a large seashell and put the smudge stick onto that. Then take the smudge stick and walk around your house or whatever building you wish to psychically protect with the smudge stick. Other Native Americans will also obtain a special bird feather to wave the smoke from the smudge stick onto the area that they want to smudge. In other words, the area they want the smoke to travel on. If you do not yet have found the feather, you can wave the smudge stick in the area where you want the smoke to go. The object is to, quote unquote, smudge. Smudge is the verb. All the openings into your house, all the windows, and when we're talking about the windows, all four sides of each window, and all doors, doorknobs, and doorways, bathroom drains and toilets, as well as kitchen drains, kitchen doors, back doors, etc. And then you want to smudge yourself using the feather or just blowing that smoke from the smudge stick. Blow the smoke onto your head, down your neck, down your chest, the stomach, lower abdomen, pelvis, legs, and then do your arms, and then come up from behind, and then up from the back of your legs, your calves, your thighs, your ass, your back, and the back of your neck, the back of your head, and then rotate around your head 3 times the smudge stick. So through your house or whatever building you're working on, travel slowly and deliberately and with intense focus and attention. Same thing goes for your body. This will remove negativity from your home, building, body, or the home of a friend who is being bothered by negative spirits or entities. It is very, very powerful. Also, there is a substance called copal, which works very similarly. Another great technique for clearing out negativity might seem a bit odd for most guys, but it certainly is not strange for most women. Buy yourself flowers. The more flowers, the better. The bigger the flower arrangement, the better. Flowers have the natural ability to absorb negative energies. If you're going to be doing any kind of divination, automatic writing like Sixto Paz Wells did, tarot card reading, contacting spirit guides, shamanic travel, and so forth, put flowers, even if you can only afford a small flower in a tiny pot, onto your table in front of you. Remember what we said about matching up energy. Everything is vibration. Spirit guides often are vibrating at a different frequency than you are. You have to use various quote-unquote tools to match up your energetic frequencies. For some, special stones, crystals, special power places, special trees are ways to connect with their spirit guide or guides. Drumming also helps many people to travel into the spirit worlds. Get yourself not just any drum, but what is called a frame drum, F-R-A-M-E drum. Now, this drum is found throughout the world. It's also found mainly in the Middle East and also in Ireland. In the Middle East, it is called a bendir, B-E-N-D-I-R. And if you go onto the internet and look for a company called Lark in the Morning, Lark, L-A-R-K, like the bird, Lark in the Morning, they have the most incredible catalog. Ask them to send you their big catalog. It'll blow your mind. It has every instrument imaginable and unimaginable. It has every instrument on this planet and off this planet. It is just so much fun to go through this catalog. And many of these instruments are quite affordable. You'll be amazed. Some of them also are quite incredibly expensive, but you can have tremendous amount of valuable work done simply through subscribing to this catalog. Go out into nature as much as possible, please. For as long as possible, please. For many city people, it takes several hours out in nature to start reattuning their subtle bodies to the frequencies of nature. So an hour-long picnic is not going to do the trick. You might be able to make love to your lover, but you're not going to attune yourself to nature in an hour. So go outside and stargaze as frequently as possible. Go outside and gaze at the clouds as frequently as possible. Move the clouds around with your mind. If you don't immediately know the phase of the moon at this very moment, now that I'm asking you, you should be asking yourself, why don't I know? Some people and entities thrive on terror and rage. A goal for you is to look within and see what it is that your being feeds on. Does love, celebration, music, friendship bring you alive? Does this make you happy? Does your human being feed on love, celebration, music, friendship? Or do you seem to feel stronger when you are enraged by this or that, like we were talking about before, and every day you need to post something on Facebook that makes you furious? Do you only feel alive when you hate some group of people, a neighbor, a religion, or do you feel alive when you are in the arms of friends and lovers who are hugging you and welcoming you into their homes? Which do you look forward to more? Visiting your best friend or finding some information that you can leak about some group to some other group of people? Christopher Columbus encountered unidentified flying objects during his voyage. This is notable because it was the first recorded quote-unquote European sighting of a paranormal event in the New World. Of course, we must remember that the wise and ancient indigenous citizens of our land, the Indians, the Native Americans, had long histories of interactions with UFOs and direct interactions with the visitors. Yes, we need all the energies of Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver, and Shiva, the destroyer. However, some people become trapped in only one aspect of the spectrum of existence. Remember, life is a polychromatic spectrum of color. So think about it. Stop judging yourself. Stop thinking about what others are thinking about you. Think about it. They have already judged you. That's what these people do. Ask the universal consciousness what it is you need to know, and then relax your self-image. Let's go on a trip to Egypt for a moment. Egypt has always been interesting. It is interesting now politically, of course, but it has a great deal of importance in terms of the history of humanity. As Michael Tazarian has said, quote, "The book still has not been written on Africa," unquote. There is still a whole world of discoveries waiting for us in the gigantic continent of Africa. Some foolish people still think that Africa is a country. Well, some interesting work has been done recently on the symmetry of the faces of several of the ancient carvings in Egypt. Now, some of you may have heard something about this. I'm talking about some of the giant faces of the pharaohs, those beautiful faces that we see, the huge, gigantic carvings. Now, symmetry has to do with the similarity between the right and the left sides of something. Do you know, for example, that no human being is perfectly symmetrical? True. If I took a photo of you and cut it down the middle, even if I had a computer calculate exactly what point is precisely in the middle of your face, and then say copy the right side of your face, flipped it over so that there would be two right sides of your face. Now, are you with me here? Then you would be unrecognizable. Two right sides of your face or two left sides of your face would render you unrecognizable even to your best friends. That's how different the sides of our bodies are. Even you women listening to this, many of you worry that one of your breasts are smaller than the other, or one of them are bigger than the other. Don't worry. Every woman on earth has one breast smaller than the other. We are not truly symmetrical beings. Well, so they did this work with the faces of the Egyptian pharaohs, these gigantic heads, and they discovered something remarkable. They found that the two sides of the faces were perfectly, not just similarly or closely, but perfectly symmetrical. Now, no human sculptor on the face of the earth can carve a face perfectly symmetrical. Did you know that Wilhelm Reich discovered orgonite? I never knew that until just this week. I have been studying Reich and doing Reichian therapy since about 1990. The effects of orgonite are not entirely known. Want to escape trauma-based mind control? I get a lot of letters about this. A fellow by the name of J. Parker survived satanic ritual abuse to come forward and start the healing. Go to atheorywarrior.com. That's ETHERI warrior, WARRIOR.com. There's some fabulous information there, as well as valuable objects that you might consider making it a goal to own. And I repeat, for the umpteenth time, I receive no money from any of my podcasts. I do not even use the YouTube advertisement program. Okay, you don't see any YouTube advertisements on any of my podcasts unless they're doing it against my will and knowledge. The only money I make is from the sale of the new edition of my book published by New Falcon called Beyond Duality, The Art of Transcendence. Please purchase a copy and support our work. It's very important that everybody be attuned to their psychic powers, their spiritual abilities, whatever you want to call it, because everyone has these abilities. Jesus said that the kingdom of God is within you. He also said, quote, "You are gods," unquote. People spend so much time talking about the suffering of Jesus and the death of Jesus on the cross, but they seem to forget for some reason Jesus saying, quote, "You are gods," unquote, and, quote, "The kingdom of heaven is within you," unquote, and, quote, "The things I do, you shall do even greater things," unquote. There's a strange obsession with suffering and pain in Western society. Here in Cuernavaca, believe it or not, there is a museum about torture. The whole museum is filled with actual devices of torture used by these priests to torture men and women. It's very, very interesting something. You know, if you look at these devices, and I'm sure some of you have, very, very few of them tortured the male penis. But most of them devoted to women would torture the female vagina in horrible ways. Isn't it interesting that in some way, in some mysterious, strange way, a certain respect was shown to the male penis? I mean, they would strip the flesh off the bodies and do all the most horrible things to the men, yet they would not harm the penis. Very interesting, makes you think, doesn't it? The veils between life today and larger life are thin these days, and seekers of enlightenment may pass freely through them in the dream time, in meditation, out of body experience, vision quest, personal revelationary experiences, or shamanic journeys. So the veils between the worlds are getting thinner and thinner. Rudolf Steiner, founder of the Light Source Group, and noted healer and channeler, reveals the following, quote, "There's so much more to our world than just the mundane, everyday things we take for granted. When we raise our eyes above ordinary reality and get even so much as a quick glimpse of the non-ordinary, our consciousness begins to expand. There are wonders to behold, to learn about, to grasp, and to experience," unquote. A little more about Egypt. Not only are kangaroos portrayed in Tut's tomb, but over 100 boomerangs were found. Obviously, Australia was not unknown to them. You want a better life? Pranayama. You want more energy? Pranayama. You want your problem solved? Pranayama. Pranayama is the first and last resort for all situations and difficulties. For you begin life by an inhalation and you end life with an inhalation. It's all about breath. We live in a replica of the astral plane. Another way of stating this is that the spirit world is much more, quote unquote, real than this physical world. All great inventions are first done on the astral. I have sat down at the piano and just started playing a piece that obviously was composed at some other time and place, which definitely was not this physical world. I did not compose this piece in what we call real life. This piece was recorded. Now I'm talking about an actual piece that one morning, just as I woke up, I went directly to the piano and I started playing, and the piece was all there in my fingers. This piece was recorded professionally by a very mysterious Hindu man with very, very long hair going down below his waist and a very long beard. And it was sung by the famous operatic soprano Catherine Luna. I called the piece Peter Quince at the Clavier, after the great poem by Wallace Stevens. Now we are entering a reproduction of the fifth level of the astral plane. The highest level of the astral plane is where the Supreme Being dwells. This is what we have traditionally called heaven. The lowest realms of the astral plane are where the bottom feeders dwell. It is the level of the unicellular beings and beings who live and dwell in swamps. When I was ill and in coma last November, I traveled all the way from the lowest level, the swamp level of the astral plane, to the very highest level. Most of humanity is living in a state of anxiety. Think about it. Can you think straight if you're anxious? No. You can barely focus. You're so worried about something. Maybe you're worried if your girlfriend or boyfriend loves you. Maybe you're worried if you can pay the minimum on your credit card this month. Maybe you're worried if you can afford to take your date out for a nice dinner Friday night. Maybe you're worried that you will never find anyone to love you. Maybe you're worried about your health. You see, I could go on and on for an hour or more, and we still wouldn't cover all the things that average people feel anxious about on a weekly and sometimes daily and sometimes hourly basis. Do you think any group of people who are feeling such anxiety can mount together a reasonable response to an unreasonable situation? Isn't it easy to control people who are, in actuality, out of control? And so, what do people do? I won't go into a million details, but just one example. They will use one credit card to pay off another credit card. Do you think this solves the problem? Do you think the person then can relax and not feel anxious? Oh, maybe a tiny bit for a day or two, maybe. But then he or she starts worrying about paying off the other credit card. So there's apparently no way out. And what do animals do who have no way out? You ever hear the expression, a cornered animal? It's time to create your own government inside yourself. Ralph Smart, a truly smart individual, says, quote, "The government was created to govern your mental, but when you become a limitless being, you create your own government inside you," unquote. He also says that television means tells lies to your vision. The secret is to love yourself. Now, you might be saying, "What are you talking about, Laurence? Don't you know about the attack in such and such a country last night? Don't you know about astral attacks and so on?" But stay with me here for a moment. I think I've earned your trust. Think about how you talk to yourself. Really listen to the way you talk to yourself. Can you hear yourself? Can you hear the voice that is speaking inside yourself? Is it calling you stupid, an idiot, a fool, slow, a loser, ugly, and so on? Aren't many people talking to themselves in ways that they would never, ever talk to their friends? People say things to themselves, call themselves such terrible names that they would never say to anyone else. The cruelty that we so often wreak on ourselves is amazing. We were talking about torture before, and our preoccupation in our culture with suffering. You must know yourself. The unexamined life is not worth living. Therefore, the examined life is worth living. A big part of all of this is celebration. I'm not talking about dulling your senses with something like alcohol. I'm talking about awakening every scintillating nerve fiber in your body to states of extreme ecstasy. Now that's celebration. Something that really captures my imagination, as you know, are the Tibetans. We talked last time about the Tibetan Book of the Dead and how it is the most sophisticated and knowledgeable book on earth about the afterlife. Well, it doesn't stop there, and it doesn't start there either. 12,000 years ago, a group of beings called the Dropas came to Tibet. They were very small creatures, maybe 1 meter tall, and they created these mysterious discs. Maybe you've seen them. If not, Google image them. They are perfectly round with a perfectly round hole in the middle. They have recovered over 700 of these strange discs. What are they? Some form of memory recording device? They certainly resemble a UFO that was recently seen over Russia. They're very, very fascinating. For many thousands of years, Tibet was ruled by these terrible beings called the Bön. These beings were very frightening looking and terrified the local populace. This is a true story. The king did not know what to do, so he called for the wisest wizard on earth. His name was Padmasambhava. Also, he is known as Guru Rinpoche. He was living in Nepal at the time, and the king sent a message to him, "Please come help me." Padmasambhava knew that he was going to have a huge fight on his hands. So he, in turn, asked his lover, a beautiful, sexy, powerful woman, very much like Isis was to Osiris in Egypt. Well, this beautiful and powerful woman was named Yeshe Tsogyal. Together, the two of them, Padmasambhava and Yeshe Tsogyal, went and fought the Bön. They won the fight, but just like in Lord of the Rings, they did not destroy the Bön. They said to them, quote, "We will let you live here, reproduce, and enjoy your lives, provided you protect the land," unquote. That is why, when you look at some Tibetan artwork of some of their deities or gods and goddesses, they look scary. Well, they are meant to look scary because they are scary. They are the Bön, who were using their awesome powers to protect Tibet and to no longer attack Tibet. They made an agreement. Remember, we were talking before about agreements, about soul contracts? Well, a soul contract was made with the Bön. Stephen Harefield says, quote, "When you make something more powerful than you are, you can't have it. If for no other reason, it controls you," unquote. Like giving power to little pieces of paper and then calling them money, and then worrying about this money. We give power and control over everything around us. Some people want to be an actor on the stage, yet they never realize that they are always an actor on a stage. Yet they take it too seriously. And this is another thing that Harefield points out. Why then did Tibet fall against Red Communist China? There are different theories about what happened. You see now that the Tibetan lamas, that means the great Tibetan teachers, are all over the world. They are bringing their very ancient wisdom to the world. Also, the Dalai Lama started a new homeland called Upper Dharmasala, and now today the Dalai Lama is probably more famous than the Pope. I would say he is the most famous spiritual figure on the face of the earth. Snowden talks about something fascinating. Now, if he were just rehashing the same old stories with the same old terminology, I would be very suspicious. Not that I am so gullible to buy his story hook, line, and sinker, but he speaks about extremophiles who may live at different temperatures than us, deep in the mantle of the earth. Why? Because the mantle has been the most stable part of the earth for the longest period of time. Now that's fascinating. He goes on to say, quote, "The president receives daily briefings about their activities. Analysts believe their technology to be so far advanced that we stand little chance of survival in any potential war. The general sentiment is that we are but ants from their perspective, so there is little chance that contingency plans to detonate nuclear weapons in deep caverns to sting the foe would have any hope of destroying them or discouraging further attacks," unquote. Now, we've talked here on The Place Inside before about these strange explosions and noises people are hearing all around the world for the last 3 years or so. I myself heard one of these sounds which I described in another episode. I have been hearing these sounds frequently and lately here in Cuernavaca, Mexico. My point is that there is a huge amount of underground activity going on by the United States government and perhaps by these extremophiles. We discussed how just very recently it has been discovered that a whole system of tunnels existed under Europe, stretching from Scotland to Istanbul. So really, what are these explosions? And if you really want to get into it, look into all the patents that have been taken out in just the last several years on tunneling machines, on machines specially made to tunnel through the hardest rock. Who's making the machines? Who's buying these machines? Who's using these machines? Now, if you want to read a really entertaining book, read The Descent by Jeff Long, Long. It's called The Descent. it has exactly to do with extremophiles, the US traveling underground, and some really remarkable other stuff that I don't want to spoil for you. It is science fiction, but you and I both know that science fiction is very often, frequently, science fact. Just wearing, let's say, a Halloween costume. Independent researcher Pat Chouinard presented information and theories about an ancient race of giants, as well as lost civilizations and their artifacts. There are numerous cross-cultural references to giants, as well as creation myths that involve them. Quote, I think they were a highly advanced race, and they were said to have a lifespan of hundreds of years, he noted. Mesopotamia and Atlantis were not the first civilizations. He goes on, quote, I believe there were hundreds, thousands of civilizations going back to a very, very remote and early time in our history, unquote. Sanskrit writings of India refer to civilizations that existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. And Chouinard says, quote, and I think the giants go back to this time, unquote. One of the mysteries he's explored concerns the finding of ancient out-of-place Caucasians in such countries as New Guinea, China, and Japan, as well as in North America, far before the Europeans had arrived. Some of these were described as, quote, red-haired giants, unquote. And the Native Americans have myths about light-skinned giants called the, quote, bright white god, unquote, and Quetzalcoatl. Chouinard suspects that this race, which might have been as tall as 15 to 18 feet, gradually died out from epidemics or other factors. And I think it's fascinating how this ties with what we were talking about last week, how the Smithsonian has buried in the depths of the museum all these skeletons and skulls. Chouinard also talked about the demise of the Atlantean civilization, suggesting that primitive groups that coexisted on the fringes of Atlantis as it was fading picked up some remnants of their advancements and eventually rose up to become the historic civilizations that we know from ancient history. Chouinard also spoke about ancient megalithic structures like Gobekli Tepe and Baalbek, as well as the anomalous discovery of the, quote, ex-Woman of Siberia, unquote, in which a finger bone was found that came from a, get this, separate, unknown, evolutionary line that dated back some 50,000 years. There's a woman that was living here in Mexico. It's a very tragic story. A great, great archaeologist who did work here. And when she sent her archaeological findings out for carbon dating, they came back with dates of 50 to 100,000 years ago. And she became frightened. It freaked her out. She was a traditional scientist after all. This made no sense. So she continued sending out samples to all different laboratories all over the world. And she continued digging. And more scientists and archaeologists came to the site. So the decades passed, and various methods of radioactive dating improved and developed. But they continued to give readings back of 50, 100, 150,000 years. So this poor dear woman decided not to publish. But the dig is still there. It's near a town called Puebla in Mexico. And it is my intention to go visit this dig, to touch it, to see with my own two eyes. As happens so frequently, science is catching up with ancient esoteric wisdom. Rudolf Steiner in his esoteric science of anthroposophy, as well as such writers as Max Heindel, who developed I wouldn't say developed, but actually taught true Rosicrucianism, not those Rosicrucians who pass out that watered down spiritual teachings, the advertisements you see in the backs of magazines, but true Rosicrucian teaching. Max Heindel. Deep and profound ancient knowledge. Both Heindel and Steiner spoke about the earth as we know and call it today, that it has passed, get ready for this, through several incarnations and will continue to pass through several more. Just like a human being lives, dies, and is reborn, so too has this planet lived, died, and been reborn. Our planet has been going through a progressive descent deeper into the material world from incarnation to incarnation. That is why I said in a previous podcast that many people alive today would not be able to physically see the ancient peoples of Mu, Lemuria, and Atlantis. And they were just, quote-unquote, recent in terms of the incarnations of the earth. Each time the earth, quote-unquote, dies, so to speak, it goes into a sleep called a pralaya. This is also called a cosmic night. Occult science teaches that there are 777 incarnations, but that does not mean that the earth undergoes 777 metamorphoses. It means that evolving life makes 7 revolutions around the 7 globes of the 7 world periods. So the earth dives into matter and then ascends out of matter. The good news is that we have just passed the deepest phase of our descent into matter, and we are now on the way upward. This pilgrimage of involution and evolution including the shortcut of initiation, is embodied in the caduceus, or the staff of Mercury. The names of the incarnations of the Earth are traditionally given planetary names, but are not to be associated in ways that people commonly associate with these heavenly bodies. We are not talking about other planets in the current solar system. We are talking about other incarnations of the planet Earth. So the following that I'm going to mention are all the incarnations, those that have been, are, and are to come. Their names are as follows: Saturn, Sun, Moon, Earth, Jupiter, Venus, and Vulcan. The only slight similarity to a planet in our solar system is the Earth period, which we are now in. Anyone who is into literature or music or film knows the importance of recapitulation, or as we say in common parlance, a recap. How can we define a recap or recapitulation? One way is to say it is an act or instance of summarizing the main points of something. So it is a summary, like when someone says to you, summarize the main points of his presentation. And this is true and applies to what humans experience during each incarnation of the Earth. We all have to go through a summarization of what we went through when the Earth was in previous incarnations. Have you ever thought that in your very life, part of your life has been a summary of what you lived through in a previous incarnation? Now, an even more profound, deep definition of recapitulation can be stated as follows: it is the repetition of an evolutionary or other process during development or growth. Now, this closely connects with the work of perhaps the greatest magician of the 20th century. And no, I am not talking about Aleister Crowley, but of Austin Osman Spare. When we are a fetus in the womb, we recapitulate all the evolutionary phases that we have passed through on Earth. For example, at one point, the fetus actually grows gills, just like a fish. At another point, we grow a tail. The tail is most always reabsorbed by the body, but many a newborn has literally had his tail snipped off by the doctor after he or she was born. This is quite true. Many newborns come into the world with tails. In the Jupiter period, the mind will be vivified to some extent, and man can then imagine forms which will live and grow like plants do. Graham Hancock has suggested that our world could be interpenetrated by other dimensions or realms that are most often undetectable. He stated that this could account for the UFO phenomena, which seems quite elusive. These other dimensions could also include what we call the spirit world. He cited how cave paintings dating back thousands of years depicted supernatural beings. During the medieval era, people spoke about fairies, elves, and the realms they inhabited, while today alien abduction and UFO craft are reported. What we're seeing is actually one phenomena, quote, viewed through different cultural spectacles, unquote, that originates in a parallel dimension or realm, according to Hancock's possible theory. I recommend strongly that if you haven't read it already, read his novel Entangled, 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 which deals with time travel, NDEs, and the supernatural. Interestingly, in his book, he featured Neanderthal characters who were compassionate. And now, well after he wrote the book, scientific reports have just emerged that suggest Neanderthals were indeed nurturing and caring, and not the brutish thugs that most people picture. Well, it took me a few days reading to get into the book, but once I had entered his world, I was hooked. It is a great read that I highly recommend. After all, it was written by perhaps the greatest paranormal writer alive today, present company excluded, as well as you, my esteemed listeners. In the Venus period, when the human has acquired feeling, he can create living, growing, and feeling things. Now, doesn't that remind us of the animal world? For animals can live and grow like plants, but they can also feel. And their feelings lead them to move. Now, when the human reaches a state of quote-unquote perfection at the end of the Vulcan period, he will be able to imagine into existence creatures that will live, grow, feel, and think. Now, this reminds us of the human being. So we go from the humble stone to the plant, to the animal, to the human being, but it doesn't stop there. Evolution, ascension keeps going. We have cellular memories of everything that has occurred in all the incarnations of the planet, and of all our reincarnations during this incarnation of the earth. And we have the power to reframe them and retrain them with a counter belief. Again, we go back to contracts. Remember that. And we go back to NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. We have the power of reframing them and retraining them with a counter belief. the latest science is saying that it takes 56 days to take a destructive belief, say a belief that you will never find a woman or man to share your life with, or a belief that you are helpless, or worse, a belief that you are dying of a terminal illness. The counter belief would be my discovery that I reveal in my book, Beyond Duality, the Art of Transcendence. You ask yourself the question, when does what I want appear to be what I don't want? The key word here is the word appear. When does what I want appear to be what I don't want? And of course, one of the hardest things to do is to know what you want. So many of us are fighting to get out of the box, but all we see are the walls of the box. We have to use our imagination and imagine something outside of the box. Imagination is the key to all magic and transformation. Albert Einstein revealed, quote, "Imagination is more important than knowledge," unquote. This is because imagination is directly connected to the unconscious, or some will say to the spirit world. So imagination is not just daydreaming or a waste of time. Your parents or teachers may have been very hard on you and yelled at you for being a daydreamer. However, the way to connect with the spirit worlds is directly through the imagination. So stay with me here. If, for example, you start to imagine energy flowing out of your arms and out of your hands, directing it against, say, a wall in front of you, some energy, a electric blue energy bursting, shooting forth out of your arms and hands and blasting the wall in front of you. At first, you might feel totally silly and think that you're just imagining things, and what's the point of all this? But actually, you are awakening powers inside you. You are connecting with real spirit powers. When lightning strikes, scientific fact, before the bolt of lightning strikes the earth, a greeting signal is sent up from the earth to the sky, to the clouds. This greeting signal then kind of creates an energetic pathway for the lightning bolt to know that it can now descend on this coordinate. And then bam, there's the lightning bolt and the boom of thunder. So think deeply about this scientific reality and how it is a powerful analogy for the connection between the greeting signal of your imagination connecting with the brilliant lightning bolt of real spiritual connection. The imagination greets the spirit, or if you are not very spiritual, you can say imagination greets the unconscious, or you can say as above, so below, and as below, so above. We have to deal with the "that's not true" effect. It's an unconscious reaction from the old self, or we can call it the old pattern. We are much more than just brain signals. We must become aware for the immediate present that there is going to be a counter-dialogue, an argument between our old beliefs and the new beliefs that we want to replace them with. You see, we have to prepare for a bit of a battle. We have to be ready to counterattack the part of you that says, that's just imagination. No, I know you're really stupid, ugly, lonely, so on and so forth. I know you're never going to make a difference in the world. I know you're never going to have any money or anyone that will love you. Well, I could go on, but these are just old energy grooves that are running over and over again, and they appear to us like reality. They are not reality. They are just the old pattern trying to keep things the way they have always been done. If you have always been told by your parents that you're ugly, your brain is going to want to keep things the way they've always been and will do everything it can to make reality appear that you are ugly, even if you are beautiful. The greatest strength comes from flexibility. I refer you again to my book, Beyond Duality, The Art of Transcendence, the new 2nd edition. We talk a great deal about how magical manifestation is intimately related to resistance and flexibility. Think about this. Just because you are resistance doesn't mean the wind is going to stop blowing. We have said many times that no two snowflakes have ever been the same in the history of the world. No two human fingerprints have ever been the same in the history of the world. I wrote in one of my books about an experience I had at an Aikido retreat when I saw a bear. And at the time I was standing with a psychologist who was also an Aikido master, and I asked him, why is it that we do not say, this is a beautiful bear, but that is an ugly bear? Why is it that we humans make these strange distinctions, these judgments about if one being has a little more weight or a little less weight, then they are no longer attractive to us? Do you know, for a while in India, their spectacular movies they have, they call it Bollywood, would feature very beautiful women and very handsome men. Yet, and the absolutely fascinating thing is that they were all overweight to our Western way of thinking. However, they were super beautiful and super handsome to the Indian people. Why? Because having a little belly would prove that you had enough money to afford food to eat. Jim Blaskovich and Jeremy Bailenson, two pioneering experts in the field of virtual reality, joined Ian Punnett recently to reveal when we all might be living in the Matrix. Now, I've been saying for months now in The Place Inside that time froze somewhere during the 1970s. Recently, a friend of mine came out on Facebook and stated blatantly that time stopped in 1947. Something is going on here. we wonder why there aren't bases on the moon. Have you ever wondered about that? I mean, like we read about in Scientific American and magazines we read when we were younger, or like in the movie 2001, A Space Odyssey, and truly all the astronauts who did walk on the moon believed this to be the inevitable reality of the next coming years after the 60s moonwalks, that yes, there would be bases on the moon. Well, yes, there are bases on the moon, but the public has been frozen into believing that in our reality, we never return to the moon. This is much more profound than just a quote-unquote lie from the government, because this affects so many areas of our lives. For example, there are infinite energy machines that are truly perpetual motion machines. But we are told that they do not exist, and furthermore that it is impossible to build them, that scientifically it is impossible to build them. Those scientists and inventors who have created such machines, when they go to the patent office, are told that such machines are scientifically impossible, that there is scientific impossibility, and that therefore the patent office cannot grant them a patent. What is the result? We are still driving around in cars that run on gasoline. Our entire reality is truly just like in the movie The Matrix. We are not physically plugged into something, but we are collectively hypnotized into believing in an impoverished reality, into a collective agreement, into a collective contract where gas costs a lot of money, food costs a lot, our paychecks don't quite stretch long enough, and we desperately need oil. According to Baalanson, we are at the cusp of a future where virtual reality is moving from your movie theater into your business cubicle. New, glasses-free 3D auto stereoscopic displays like in Nintendo's 3DS, suitless movement tracking, similar to Microsoft's Kinect, and advances in artificial intelligence all will combine to allow people to do things they could not actually do in the physical world. For instance, a person conducting a digital meeting or teaching a virtual class can program an avatar, which you know is a graphical representation of a user, to maintain eye contact with every single participant in the meeting. Can you imagine that? Now, Baalanson offered an even more insidious example of the person who is leading the meeting morphing the appearance and sound of his or her avatar to ingratiate and manipulate each person in the audience. So to each person in the audience, in the business meeting, that is watching and listening to the speaker, they are looking at their ideal man or their ideal woman. The two also commented on something we have to talk about. How virtual reality is going to be utilized by the porn industry, as well as delved into, it just brings up the whole subject of immorality and immortality, when one thinks about it, where one's avatar can continue beyond its user's physical life. Balanson mentioned a commercial for a microwave popcorn that uses a recreation of the deceased founder of the company. I don't know if you remember Orville Redenbacher, but they actually got the rights to digitally re-image Orville Redenbacher in their current commercials. So it may be possible that grandchildren can interact with digital versions of their deceased grandparents. But will they really be interacting with their true grandparents, as we talked about in the last episode? The point about the porn industry is very important, in that it shows us that morality will have no more meaning to a great segment of humanity in the future. Because you can kill people in a very realistic way in the very near future. You can rape, torture, and so forth without supposedly harming anyone. What happens to your integrity? What happens to your values as a human being? What will it mean to be a human in a world when you can do anything you want and then plead in all honesty before the judge, quote, "But I didn't hurt anybody," unquote? Is this truly a victimless crime? Or is this a crime against humanity? I say we are in danger of losing our identity as human beings. Will we be able to switch back and forth from being a crazed killer all night long in your home the night before to being a gentle lover the next morning with your girlfriend or boyfriend? As these authors pointed out, the morality can be directed at real human beings through avatars that use sophisticated psychiatric algorithms to manipulate business people at meetings. In other words, your avatar can appear and act in ways that the computer knows is particularly appealing to the client. Just like is taught today in neuro-linguistic programming, we can mirror another person's respiration, body language, and so forth in order to enter into a state of rapport with the person. This is taught in many business seminars. But imagine all of this happening faster than the speed of light through quantum computers calculating your client's psychological responses to your sales pitch. Your client will be looking at their idealized image of a human being, of a god. How can they resist you? How can they resist the sales pitch? In a political election, if I am running for president, I can morph my face to look 40% like your face. It's not enough for you to become conscious of it, but it's sufficient for you to feel that I am some part of you. You could call it a family resemblance if you want. The results could be drastic, and the candidate can literally steal your vote. Can you just imagine? This could be a nightmare world. Ian Punnett had responded by making the excellent point that there are no consequences in the virtual world of the internet. even in chat rooms, we might think we are becoming friends with someone, and then the person just disappears. Have you ever had that happen to you? I'm not talking about romantically, I'm just talking about friends. In the future, will there be some sort of police or journalism that will hunt for virtual manipulation of reality? Will it become a crime for a politician to virtually manipulate their voice so that they sound more Latino, more black, more Asian, so forth? Will there be a future Woodward and Bernstein that will reveal that a news clip in last night's news was completely faked? Certainly, we are already doing this on one level, but it can become even more real when we actually see on television a certain person, for example, shoot the president, when that individual was in reality asleep in their bed at that time. Who is going to hunt this down and have the courage to expose the deception and the deceptors? More money is being poured into sexual virtual devices than in almost any other field. Because let's be honest, the sexual slave trade is a multi-billion-dollar industry in the world today. Add on to that prostitution, pornography, sex workers of all types, and you are talking about trillions of dollars. I don't know if the word has even been invented yet for how much money we are talking about here. What is going to happen to our souls? Can we ascend? Can we evolve as human beings living in a world like this? Clearly, we have been tasked by the Creator to learn to become creators ourselves. This has been taught from time immemorial by the greatest spiritual teachers. In the Quran, we are called God's vicegerents on the earth. A vicegerent is the person who is in charge of a house when the owner is away. He or she makes all the decisions regarding the running of the house while the owner is away, and his or her decisions are absolutely final. We are truly creators of our reality. We do not need computers, quantum algorithms, or Nintendo to manifest the reality we wish to manifest. However, all of this is based on a fundamental sense that the ultimate reality is good, is loving, is just, healthy, and supplies our needs for food and security infinitely. I can only foresee, as some science fiction authors have, that there are going to be communities of artificial cyborgs and communities of flesh and blood human beings who seek to maintain their integrity. The entire hippie movement was a pre-echo, an echo that reverberates before you hear the actual sound. We are going back to Mother Nature, at least some of us, but some of us will be deluded into becoming mostly machines and computer chips. And also remember the arrogance of this global elite, the military, the gaming industry, the business world, that are working so hard on virtual reality They are nothing compared to the presence of God. So many so-called spiritual teachers truly lack the reality of the holiness of the presence of God. Some are even stating recently that we are just a short way off from actually seeing God. Well, Moses didn't actually even see God. God appeared to a mountain next to Moses, and the mountain crumbled to dust. And then in the story, God did allow Moses a tiny glimpse of the back, of God's back, but nothing more. But I have actually heard some speakers say that we are close now to seeing God. I just cannot believe this. Technology is co-opting the spiritual movement. Watch a lot of the new spiritual teachers, quote unquote, on YouTube, and they are now following the ways of the Hollywood red carpet runways. They are wearing wealthy gowns and costumes. The production is very Hollywood. Do you remember the humble way that the great teacher Greg Braden got his start on YouTube? Do you remember? I'm not going to go into too much detail. You can look for yourself. Greg Braden has authenticity. Some of these new teachers, they call themselves teachers. They have had no true training from a spiritual masters. They walk around in these fancy costumes with all sorts of blue screen special effects projected behind them. It's Las Vegas spirituality. And haven't there always been those chapels where you can get married by Elvis in Las Vegas? Well, it's happening big time. See yourself the way you want yourself to become. That's the place inside. It is the place where you become, in a genuine way, through ancient teachings that predate the Buddha, the person you want to become. Quote, "When your body's immune system is weak, you are vulnerable to diseases. So also, when your mind is weak, you are a victim of negative thoughts and emotions," unquote, writes the famous teacher Sri Shuddhananda Brahmachari. We are so hard on ourselves. Let's be honest about something. Most of us think the most awful thoughts about ourselves. If we really start paying attention to the mind chatter that goes on continuously in our heads, we think about 50,000 thoughts a day. We begin to realize that most of these thoughts are criticisms about ourselves. Do you treat yourself with the same love and compassion and forgiveness that you offer your husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, fiance, son, daughter, even your dog or cat? Self-love is not conceit, vanity, or narcissism, although that's what most people think it is. I suspect most of you listening know it's a good idea to love yourself. Self-love is not a concept, it's a choice. It's a choice and a feeling of unconditional love and respect for yourself. Self-love is just love directed toward the authentic, incredible being that you are. let yourself know that you have your own back. I'm not talking about self-esteem, because self-esteem is often connected with our achievements, but self-love is given regardless of whether or not we were popular in high school, good at gaming, read 1,000 books, or attended the most recent MUFON conference. Close your eyes, put your hand on your heart and say, you are doing the best that you can, and it's enough. There is something very powerful about closing your eyes and putting your hand on your heart. Putting your hand over your heart increases the amount of oxytocin in your body. Keep saying this over and over again. It is the mantra that will free you. Any time that you are beating up on yourself, you can use this mantra. Also, you can say to yourself, quote, I only go as fast as the slowest parts of me can go, unquote. That's another great mantra you can use. It's especially good for those people who think that they're finally going to be happy when they get that new car, that new HD flat screen TV, that new sexy girlfriend, that precious old book, a special office with the special window view, or a new apartment. Sure, pleasure feels good, but it doesn't hold a candle to joy. In my humble opinion, if you can get all three aligned, that's just the greatest. I'm talking about pleasure, joy, and love. It may not be possible, but maybe you can get the joy and the love. They come free. For example, if you can be with the sexy girlfriend who fills you with joy and who loves you and who you love, well, that's great. However, I'll tell you honestly, if you feel deep and profound love for yourself, you are going to feel absolute ecstasy. And this ecstasy does not require anyone or anything else, just you and your heart. Frequently ask yourself the question, what's the most loving thing I can do for myself right now? Maybe it's just getting a glass of water. How often do we sit at the computer and we know we're thirsty and yet we don't get up and get ourselves something to drink? Or we get out of bed and our feet are freezing and our slippers are just over there, but we don't bother to put our slippers on. You have to consciously and deliberately open yourself up as a fully realized cosmic being. There are specific tools that you use. Many of these tools have stood the test of time and been honed over the course of time to be extremely powerful and effective. For example, many of the martial arts, many of the practices of the various dervish orders. Start reading some of Idris Shah, and the practice of Tibetan Buddhism. All have been fired in the forge of time, practice, and testing by millions of people. Here's another heart exercise. Again, close your eyes and put your hand on your heart. Breathe into your heart and exhale out of your heart. In each in-breath, breathe into your heart compassion, love, and ease for yourself. and exhaling normally. When you inhale, you can imagine an experience you had when you felt so incredibly wonderful. Or you can just keep repeating those words: compassion, love, and ease. Jackie Salviti has channeled the following information, and will be done very soon. Quote, "The ultimate desire for Earth is to join one of the many federations or organizations who currently oversee planets evolving into higher frequencies of light. In other words, to become an active and conscious participant in the cosmos. In order for that to happen, the consciousness of your planet must be raised. What better way for us to assist each and every one of you than to help you heal physically, emotionally, and begin to open to the greater part of you, which will more rapidly facilitate the bringing of peace to your planet. Our goal for you is a 250-year life expectancy, disease-free. We say to each and every one of you, your service is to embrace your own beauty and power, and to heal as much of your lineage, nationality, religious beliefs, pain, sorrow, shame, suffering, damage, loneliness, stripping away of dignity, fear, anger, rage, and hate as possible." Unquote. Your service is to remember and reclaim who you really are and have always been, and to begin living it every moment of every day. That is why we are here. So for those of you who are asking, why the hell is Laurence now talking about self-love? Well, here's your answer. We must heal in order to raise the consciousness of this planet, to live a longer disease-free life, to heal morphogenetically the problems generated from our lineage, nationality, religious beliefs, pain, sorrow, shame, suffering, damage, and loneliness, to be a trans-dimensional warrior. You must learn self-love. Your goal can be to have mercy on all your dimensional selves. Where do you think your dignity, integrity, and congruency come from? Self-love. What if all of existence consisted of solely one atom? Let me tell you, if you want to change your existence, change your experiences. Your thoughts and your feelings are a record of the past. Dr. Joe Dispenza says, quote, "By the time we're 35 years old, we are a set of memorized behaviors and emotional reactions that make up who we are as an identity. So when it comes time to change, people have to realize that 5% of their conscious mind is working against 95% of what they've memorized subconsciously." Unquote. Or as Gurdjieff might say, You are mostly just a robot, feeling and thinking according to systems that create your state of being. But if you start going against the stream, doing and saying things that make you uncomfortable, and I stress that, becoming uncomfortable, and force yourself to have new and different experiences, your entire life and body is going to change. Your state of being will change. So, if no one has ever screamed at you, saying your ideas are totally crazy, that you're a madman and completely nuts, then you might want to have that experience. If no one has ever said, you are rude, you might want to have that experience. If a woman has never slapped you for telling her she looks great in that dress, then you might need to get slapped. If, on the other hand, you have never been told, you are the kindest man I have ever met, you might need to do something to have someone tell you that. I'm very serious here. You want to have a different life. Listen and follow these teachings. Your choice can transcend the old. You can have a new life, but it will not be easy, and you must push a huge amount of emotion into the program of your unconscious. You erase the past, and the past no longer exists. That is why certain Wiccans and ceremonial magickians work up a huge amount of energy, a cone of power, before releasing their statement of change. But as one who has lived through all of this and been a Wiccan and a magician, let me tell you, the amount of power you must generate inside yourself, the amount of energy, is enormous, and it cannot be associated with even strangely familiar people, events, and objects. In other words, just surrounding yourself, if you are a Wiccan, for example, with altars, cauldrons, candles, and so forth, is not going to do it for you. You must think up some kind of ceremony that completely breaks through all traditional ceremonies. Now, this ceremony might necessarily involve completely changing your environment, changing your friends, changing your apartment or house, or even moving to a foreign country. For the force of memory is so strong that when you go back into your usual environment, even after doing a powerful experiment or working, your usual surroundings can sometimes force you back into your old self. So change the pictures you have on your walls. Play different music on your MP3 player or stereo. Go to a different restaurant every time you go out to eat. And I'll tell you something remarkable. I had a wonderful girlfriend when I was going to school in Tampa, Florida. And she said to me one day, from now on, let's try something. I said, okay. Ever ready for some adventure? She said, every time we go out to eat, let's order something completely new from the menu that we've never eaten before. It didn't sound like much when she said it, but what a world of experience her experiment opened up for the both of us. Both of us not only discovered all sorts of new foods we liked, but this experiment changed our relationship. It brought us closer. We felt more love and affection for each other. What was the secret? Simple. We did something new. Utilize the quantum field. You can go beyond space and time. Expect something wonderful to happen. As Dr. Joe Dispenza says, quote, expect the unknown. Let's choose a potential in the field that's an unknown, unquote. This ends our transmission for now. We will be in contact soon.